So AI art references aren't really that useful, to the surprise of very few people, but it depends. They are useful for mood pieces and general ideation, but I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, showing them a bit of my new inspiration corner in the studio, where I've got all of my different art books. So there's art books from video games, there's like technical drawing type references, nature photography and science type stuff and things like that. And we had a quick little discussion about the different grades of usefulness in references and what they can be applied for. So if you're a 3D artist, and you're making something from a reference that a concept artist has made. Fundamentally, in an idealistic way, the most useful category of references would be like line art type things that show specifically in a very measured and technical way, like where to put polygons, right? That's kind of like an ideal. In the same way that technical drawings with measurements are an ideal for CAD design. So you've got something that's like objective and can intrinsically be transferred from one to the other. So concept art that's very like line art based and measured out from different angles, so like side and front profile, those are inherently very useful because it's much more easy to transfer. Now that's definitely not to say that anything that isn't there doesn't have the same kind of usefulness, because I was looking at the art of Sparf recently. A lot of you might recognize this type of concept work because it's the kind of thing that got made for Halo, and a lot of it is highly abstract. Right? So they've even done experiments, I think, where it's artwork just made with like simple and fundamental shapes to come together and make something more complex and interesting. And when it comes to things like abstract concept art for video game worlds, this is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with, where sometimes you'll see like this incredible piece of artwork that it describes this highly detailed and grand scale world. And then when you walk around it in a video game, it's just like drab, boring, small, basic, etc. It's because though kind of great for the image, the transferable usefulness of something like that is a bit less direct than something like a technical drawing. Obviously, like, you know, based on a whole bunch of technical limitations, artist limitations in 3D. But the reason why this is interesting to me, just this point of discussion, is that while looking at my books and getting them out of storage, I had a bit of a revelation, because I noticed that some of the books I had that I hadn't thought about for years were actually, and kind of maybe unintentionally, unbelievably amazing like reference material for 3D work. So there's one in particular I want to share, which is called Fighter, I think, Fighters, the complete book of fighters, right? So it's all about military fighter aircraft. And you'd think it'd just be like a historical, you know, non-fiction-y book about the progression of fighter design over the decades. Now, like I said, this is a book I haven't thought about for years. So as I was a kid, I didn't really notice this, but as you flick through it, and it's a really chunky book, there are like hundreds of blueprints. So in between all of the data about fighters, I think for like every single one, they've drawn out a technical drawing, a simplistic one for each of them. And it looks like perfectly to scale as well, of the different sides of the aircraft. So every single page has these on it. And what's more than that is that for some very specific legendary icons, you'll turn the page and suddenly you're met with this like perfectly detailed internal structure of it. Again, from like a set angle. So when I was looking through that, I was like, holy, it would be so difficult to find these types of references online in the way that people usually search for them. It would even be difficult for, you know, like when game developers are making a game, sometimes they'll send like a little contingent to museums and stuff to try and do research and find information. Even if you obtained like technical drawings for as many different types of fighter aircraft as you could, and you went to like all the museums you could and took as many pictures as you could, you would still probably not come back with as much like technical spatial information as is in that book. And I look at it thinking, this is an old book. How long did they take making that? It's ridiculous, like the number of drawings. And it was just this weird kind of dissonance, because there are, I think, a lot of books like that, you know, for different subjects going back through the decades, because that's what people found interesting. Nowadays, it's so much harder to find stuff that's just like so raw and technical like that, especially online. A lot of the places we look for inspiration are like ArtStation, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, or, you know, all the other kind of social things, Kara now, I suppose, as well. But it's all kind of, you know, somewhat random and not super technical. And especially with things like AI artwork, again, you're not going to find technical info like that or anything remotely as useful when just generating with an AI image generation tool. So when I was getting these books out, the revelation was that, oh my God, this is more like valuable than so many of the online sources we have now. Like, it's something that should be protected and preserved. And there are repositories online for people trying to like preserve these books because they're not really being published anymore. It's an incredible amount of raw and useful information and drawings that's kind of just fading away, which is kind of freaky. And in a book form like that as well, it doesn't rely on another service. Like, if Wikipedia goes down, we lose access to a lot of information. But if an online repository of technical drawings goes down, I don't lose what I've got in books. So I'm paying a bit more attention now, and I'm protecting them and keeping them where I can. Along those lines, other things that I'm making sure I'm looking after are certain historical and nature-based books for the same kinds of reasons, but also the print quality on some of these is extraordinary. I got a book from the last time Tutankhamun came to London. I've been to the last 2 times the exhibition came back, but the more recent exhibition was accompanied with this remarkably designed and well-printed book, and the image quality is brilliant. And that also gets me thinking about, resolution issues when we're looking at things like Pinterest. With a book, the print image quality is a slightly different limitation to like a pixel resolution limitation. Obviously, I could scan that in to digital space, but I might not be capturing all of the appropriate detail. I also think it's valuable when images like that are accompanied by the right kind of information. Because again, on the internet, we get lots of images that are disconnected and we just see them as images, like when we filter through Google under images. Or again, on Pinterest, we're just getting the extracted image content rather than the whole story. And I think when researching and looking for references for a project, for a client, whatever, it's important to keep the contextual information that surrounds it, because even that will lead you onto other areas and other sub-subjects that could enhance your work. But it's fun collecting the wide range. So anything from like the technical, hyper-accurate, and the most technical you can get is just a photograph of real life, right? Because intrinsically that a photograph has a stable set of physical laws and that every real-life photograph is going to have the same laws. So what I mean is, with a 2D artist, if they're just doing a rough drawing of one side of a character, you don't have any physical grounding in the way that you don't know what the back looks like, you don't know if the perspective is correct. You need to intuit and interpret in a way that you think would be rational in a three-dimensional space. It's a bit different for an actual photograph because you know that the thing that you're looking at can actually physically exist in a three-dimensional space because it's there. Which is why I also think there's utility in like clay sculptures of things in real life as well as digital sculptures. You can take a clay sculpture of something, even if it's a stylized like character head, and when you take pictures of that for 3D artists, that's kind of helpful in a way because they know that there's like a physical perspective going on. And I think they actually did this for Dishonored 2. Actually, now I'm mentioning that, I'm going to go and grab the book. Let me see if I can find it. All right, give me a sec to look through this. Really good book, by the way. Although this one is mostly focused on two-dimensional artwork. A lot of game art books, they have a mix of 3D and 2D, and I like seeing both. This one was very 2D heavy, but it's all still like just stunning stuff. All right, yeah, here we go. So we got general character sketches in two-dimensional space, but as I turn the page, and right here on the right. See, I wasn't specifically thinking about this when we went onto the tangent about doing physical sculpting, but I remember they do literally do that. So I can read you the little quote here that says, "Clay sculpting allows the artist to set the look and anatomy of a subject after the 2D concept and before the 3D modeling. And this saves time for the 3D modelers and helps unify the look of the characters." So it's fascinating to me how every type of possible reference you can get is still valid in its own way, even if it's just for mood pieces, right? So literally just a splat of color is a mood. And maybe that reminds me of Mirror's Edge, where I think it's a second mission, or it might be the third. You're going through like an office building and every floor has a one specific color accent. And you'll notice that there's hyper-modern artwork on the walls, but I think for each floor of the building, it's just one color that's picked, right? So that's an interesting use, fundamentally and extremely basic, as a controller for mood. And as you kind of progress from there, you get to like abstract concept works, specified characters, prop work, but only from one angle, then from multiple angles, and then from measured multiple angles, and then to technical drawings and stuff like that. It's all useful, but for different use cases. Now, I know this has been a bit of like an all over the place conversation, but the actual thing I want you to take away from this is there's no such thing as a non-useful source for reference and ideation. We've become so technically focused, again, especially with the rise of new artistic tools and all of the moral and ethical concerns that come along with that. I think we're starting to forget a bit about books and physical, like actual objects, which is again one of the reasons why I like to collect artifacts. My little historical collection in the inspiration corner. This might be a little wake-up call to if you're also the kind of person that as a kid had cool books, like picture books you would flick through, and you think, wow, that's cool. I've even got like some drawings of like aircraft in some of the books. I wonder if I can find that as well. I might do that in a second. Maybe go back, maybe get them out of a box and have another look again, because you might be sitting on this intrinsic value that we just kind of forgot about. It's also made me interested to maybe go to some charity shops, because these are the exact kind of books that no one really reads like all the way through, but people just have, like coffee table books. And they're the kind of things that people give to charity shops, like all the time, just because no one really reads them and no one really knows what they are, you know, like the general population. Why do I have this weirdly hyper-specific reference book of things? Even if it's like, we were doing the renovation for this house recently, and you know, they give you tons of sample books, and the sample books have tons of images of like the materials of different types of concrete in different places. I'm like, that's fantastic material reference. Keep everything. Like, organize it, keep it, preserve it maybe. Yeah, I just thought it was fun. Before we close this up, I'm going to see if I can find one of my childhood drawings. But if you made it this far, leave a book-related emoji in the comments. We're not done yet, but that will show me if you did get to this point. So I think this was the one I liked as a kid. The Encyclopedia of Military Aircraft. And it's quite like a bleached book, you know, sun-bleached. Now there are a lot of images in this one again. Not quite as many on the technical side as the one I showed you earlier, but it is like a good reference with pictures for each of them and information. So I think that's it. Look, I don't know how old I was, like 27? No, I'm kidding. No, I think I was like 6 or 7 or something, but it's quite funny, like, because these books were kind of lost for a little while in boxes, I didn't realize that this kind of stuff was still inside of them. So yeah, thanks for watching everyone, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.